Good evening. From the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, welcome to the first and only Vice Presidential Debate of 2020, sponsored by the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates.
Yay.
I'm Susan Page of USA Today. It is my honor to moderate this debate, an important part of our democracy. In Kingsbury Hall tonight, we have a small and socially distant
Huge
audience,
knife gang, rise up.
and we've taken extra precautions during this pandemic. Among other things, everyone in the audience is required to wear a face mask, and the candidates will be
This
seated
might be an
12 feet
unfair
apart.
generalization, but she looks like
The
she's
audience is
either a very,
enthusiastic
very
about
nice
their
lady
candidates, but
or
they've
one of the
agreed to
biggest
express
turfs
that
you could ever meet.
enthusiasm only twice, at the end of the debate.
No in between.
And now, when I introduce the candidates, please welcome California Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence.
Look at that automaton, that homunculus. Kamala Harris actually looks like a person.
Thank you.
Mike Pence looks like some sort of Greek myth come to life, and not in the good way.
Senator Harris and Vice President Pence, thank you for being here. We're meeting as President Trump and the First Lady continue to undergo treatment in Washington after testing positive for COVID-19.
Welcome,
We
Ashley.
send our thoughts and prayers to them for their rapid and complete recovery and for the recovery of everyone afflicted by the coronavirus. The two campaigns and the Commission on Presidential Debates have agreed to the ground rules for tonight. I'm here to enforce them on behalf of the millions of Americans who are watching.
She's gonna go full Karen
One
on their
note,
asses.
No one in either campaign or at the Commission or anywhere else has been told in advance what topics I'll raise or what questions I'll ask. This 90-minute debate will be divided into
Wait,
9
didn't Mike
segments
Pence
of
say
about
he
10
wasn't
minutes.
gonna have a
I'll
plexiglass
begin a
divider?
segment by posing a question to each of you, sometimes the same question, sometimes a different question on the same topic. You will then have 2 minutes to answer without interruption by me or the other candidate. Then we'll take 6 minutes or so to discuss the issue. At that point, although there will always be more to say, we'll move on to the next topic.
Damn, Kamala
want a
has
debate
2
that
glasses
is
of water,
lively.
guys.
But Americans
She's
also
double prepared.
deserve a discussion that is civil. These are tumultuous times. but
Everyone
we
will
can and
follow. You
will
have
have a
anxiety because this
respectful
lady is
exchange
very
about the big
anxiety-inducing.
issues facing our nation. Let's
Oh,
begin with
man.
the ongoing pandemic that
I
has
really
cost
hope Kamala
our
is a
country
doodler,
so much.
like she doodles during the
Senator
debate.
Harris, the coronavirus is not under control. Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face
Her hair looks
hard
nice.
choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses and schools and hotspots? A federal mandate to wear masks? You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Thank you, Susan. Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country.
It ranks
And
up
here are
there.
the facts.
Yeah.
210,000 dead people in our country in
True.
just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease.
True.
1 in 5 businesses closed.
Also true.
We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers.
Yep.
We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment. And here's the thing. On January 28th, the Vice President and the President were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it is airborne, that it will affect young people,
Get him.
and
Get him,
that
Kamala.
it would
Get him.
be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening, and they didn't tell you.
This
Can
is
you
a great
imagine
opening
if
salvo.
You knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. The president said it was a hoax. They minimize the seriousness of it. The president said, you're on one side of his ledger if you wear a mask, you're on the other side of his ledger if you don't. And in
Pence
spite
is
of
going
all
to
of
drop,
that, today they still
jump on
don't
that
have a
hoax
plan.
line because it's not
They
technically
still
true.
don't have a plan. Well, Joe Biden does. And our plan is about what we need to do around a national strategy for contact tracing, for testing. for
Also, yeah, every
administration
wall
of
will
the
fall. There's no
vaccine,
other way
and
he
making
can
sure
really
that it
do
will be
this.
free
So
for all.
he has to double down
That is the
on all of
plan
it.
that Joe Biden has and that I have, knowing that we have to get a hold of what has been going on, and we need to save our country. And Joe Biden is the best leader to do that. And frankly, this administration has forfeited
Thank you,
their
Senator
right to reelection based on this.
Thank you,
True.
Senator
The
Harris.
Republicans did treat it as
Vice
fake.
President Pence, more than 210,000 Americans have died of COVID-19 since February. The U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population is higher than that of almost every other wealthy nation on earth. For instance, our death rate is 2.5 times that of Canada next door.
True.
You head the administration's coronavirus task force. Why is the U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population higher than that of almost every other wealthy country? And you have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Susan, thank you. And I want to thank the Commission and the University of Utah for hosting this event. And,
He looks like a
Senator
ghost.
Harris, it's a privilege to be on the stage with you. And our nation has gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before, there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China. President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done, and that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world.
Except there were ways around that.
Senator Joe Biden opposed that decision. He said it was xenophobic and hysterical. But I can tell you, having led the White House Coronavirus Task Force, that that decision alone by President Trump bought us invaluable time to stand up the greatest national mobilization since World War II.
To be clear,
And I believe it saved hundreds
they bought
of thousands
time,
of American
but they didn't
lives.
do anything
Because
with
with
it.
that time, we were able to reinvent testing. More than 115 million tests have been done to date.
Also,
we were able to
we're
see to the
using our
delivery of
own tests
billions of supplies, so our doctors and nurses had the resources.
when there was
support they
already
needed.
a worldwidely
And we began
available
really
test
before the
that
month
was
of
very
February to start
reliable.
to develop a vaccine and to develop medicines and therapeutics that have been saving lives all along the way. And under President Trump's leadership, Operation Warp Speed, we believe we'll have literally tens of millions of doses of a vaccine before the end of this year. The reality is, when you look at the Biden plan, it reads an awful lot like what President Trump and I and our task force have been doing every step of the way. I mean, quite frankly, when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine, it looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about. I think the American people know that this is a president who
that's
has
fun.
put the
Thank you,
health
Vice
of America first, and the American people, I believe with my heart, can be
Thank you,
proud
Vice
of the
President.
sacrifices they have made.
Holy
to save
shit.
countless
Thank you, Vice
American
President
lives.
Fuck
Senator
this guy.
Would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked. When you're looking at over 210,000 dead bodies in our country, American lives that have been lost, families that are grieving that loss. And you know, the vice president is the head of the task force and knew on January 28th how serious this was. And then thanks to Bob Woodward, we learned that they knew about it. And then when that was exposed, the vice president said, when asked, well, why didn't y'all tell anybody? He said, because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's get
So
but
Susan, this is important.
Susan, I
I want to
have to
add,
weigh
but
in
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I have to
I'm
weigh in.
speaking.
yeah, you can
So
have
I
15 more
wanna-
seconds, and then we'll give the Vice President
Thank
a
you.
chance to
So I
respond.
want to ask the American people, how calm were you when you were panicked about where you're going to get your next roll of toilet paper? How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back? How calm
Thank
were
you.
you
Thank
when
you,
your
Senator
children
Harris.
couldn't see your parents because you were afraid they could kill them?
Let's give Vice President Pence a chance to respond. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute to
You
respond.
know, there's not a day gone by that I haven't thought of every American family that's lost a loved one. And I want all of you to know that you'll always be in our hearts and in our
Bullshit.
prayers.
Bullshit.
But when you say what the American people have done over these last 8 months hasn't worked, that's a great disservice.
It's
The
true,
sacrifices the American
though.
people have made.
I'm referring
The
to
reality,
the
if I
We
may,
have
if I may
more
finish,
deaths than most
the
third world
reality is, Dr.
countries.
Fauci said, everything that he told the president in the Oval Office, the president told the American people. Now, President Trump, I will tell you, has boundless confidence in the American
Now, this is the
people.
problem
He
with
only
Mike
spoke with
Pence,
confidence that we'd get
is
through
that
this
he
together.
makes the
When you say it
unreasonableness
hasn't worked,
of the Trump
Dr. Fauci
administration
and
look
Dr. Birx and our
respectable.
medical experts came to us in the second week of March. They said if the president didn't take the unprecedented step of shutting down roughly half of the American economy, that we could lose 2.2 million Americans.
But they left
That's
it up to the
reality.
states.
They also
Thank you,
said
Vice
to us, if
President
we did
Pence.
everything right, Susan, we could still lose more than 200,000 Americans.
Vice
Now,
President
one
Pence.
life lost is too
Thank you.
many, Susan. But the American people, I believe, deserve
Yep.
credit.
One
for the
life lost is
sacrifices
too
that
many.
they have
So what
made
does
for
that
the
make?
health of their
Over
family,
200,000
their
lives
neighbors first,
lost?
Our doctors, our nurses, our first
Thank you, Vice
responders.
President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago at what seems to have been a super spreader event for senior administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
Well, the American people have demonstrated
questions.
over the last 8 months.
No, the
They've been
question
given the
wasn't about
facts.
the American
They're willing to
people.
put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first. And President Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic, when we were losing a heartbreaking number of 2,500 Americans a day,
We're
we
still
surged
losing
resources in New
700
Jersey and
Americans
New York,
every
and New
day to
Orleans, and
this.
Detroit. We told the American people what needed to be done, and the American people made the sacrifices. When the outbreak of
Yeah,
the Sun Belt
we
happened
did.
this summer, again,
You did.
Americans stepped forward. But the reality is the work of the President of the United States goes on. A vacancy on the Supreme Court of the United States has come upon us, and the President introduced Judge Amy Coney
Yes,
Barrett.
thank you. Thank
This
you.
doesn't have
At
anything
the-
to do with
if
the
I may
question
say,
he was
at Rose
asked.
Garden event, there's been a great deal of speculation about it. My wife Karen and I were there and honored to be there. Many of the people who were at that event, Susan, actually were tested for
Yes.
coronavirus, and it was an outdoor event, which all of our scientists regularly and routinely advise.
Yeah, but
The
you
difference
weren't
here is
doing the other
President
things they
Trump and I
advise.
trust the American people
No,
to make choices in the
fuck.
best interest of their health. Joe
I'm
Biden
going to have an
and
aneurysm
Kamala
live
Harris
on stream.
consistently
Okay?
talk about mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care,
Thank you,
the
Vice
Green New
President Pence.
Deal, all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the
Here's the
freedom
thing
of the
about
American people.
Let's talk about respecting
about freedom,
the American
sure.
people. You respect the American people when you tell them the truth. You respect the American people when you
Get
have
'em.
the courage
Get 'em,
to be a
Kamala. Get 'em.
leader speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves. But this administration stood on information that if you had as a parent, if you had as a worker, knowing you didn't have enough money saved up, and now you're standing in a food line because of the ineptitude of an
Get 'em. Get
administration
'em.
that was
Get 'em.
unwilling to speak the truth to the American people. So let's talk about caring about the American people. The American people have had to sacrifice far too much because of the incompetence of this
Celia.
administration. It is asking too much of the people.
Susan, we talked
No,
about
Vice
the
It is
President
American
asking too much of the people.
Look-
That they would not be equipped with the information they need to help themselves to protect
Susan,
their
the
parents
President-
and
No,
their
I'm sorry.
children.
Kamala Harris,
Here's the
Senator Harris.
thing about
I'm sorry.
Pence.
It's fine, I'm Kamala.
No, you're Senator Harris to me. For life to get back to normal, Dr. Anthony Fauci and other experts say that most of the people who can be vaccinated need to be vaccinated. But half of Americans
thing
now
about
say
Pence
they wouldn't take a vaccine.
Is
if it was
he
released now.
doesn't have the redeeming
If
qualities
the
of
Trump
charisma that
administration
Trump
approves a
has.
vaccine before
So
or after
watching
the
him
election,
is just
should
infuriating.
Americans
There's no
take it,
laughter
and would
involved.
you take it?
If the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it, absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Vice President Pence, there have been a lot of repercussions from this pandemic. In recent days, the president's diagnosis of COVID-19 has underscored the importance of the job that you hold and that you are seeking. That's our second topic tonight. It's the role of the vice president.
Now, I don't like
One of you will
Kamala
make
Harris.
history on January 20th.
But she
You will
has
be the
good
vice
delivery.
president to the oldest president the United States has ever had. Donald Trump will be 74 years old on Inauguration Day. Joe Biden will be 78 years old. That already has raised concerns among some voters, concerns that have been sharpened by President Trump's hospitalization in recent days. Vice President Pence, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan, thank you, although I would like to go back.
I think we need to
Oh,
move on.
please
to the
don't.
Thank
issue
you,
of
but I would like to
vice
go
Please
back.
don't.
Because the reality is that
We've
we're
let
going to have a
200,000
vaccine,
people die, Mike
Senator,
Pence.
in record time, in unheard of time, in less than a year.
By the way,
We have
if we
5
have a
companies
vaccine
in
by
phase
Christmas,
3
200,000
clinical
more
trials.
people are
And
still
we're right now
estimated to die
producing
by
tens of
then.
millions of doses. So the fact that you continue to undermine public confidence in a vaccine, if the vaccine emerges during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives.
Holy
The
fuck.
reality is that we will have a
Holy
vaccine,
fuck,
we
this
believe,
scumbag.
before the end of this year. And it will have the capacity to save countless American lives. And your continuous undermining
You're
of
the one,
confidence in a vaccine
your
is
party
just-
has been
it's
pushing
just
the message that
unacceptable.
old
And let me also
people and
say,
people who have
the reality
disabilities
is when you talk
should
about
die if
about
they get
failure in
infected by this.
administration, we actually do know what failure looks like in a pandemic. It was 2009. The swine flu arrived in the United
Yeah,
States.
you know what didn't happen when the
Thankfully, it
swine
was-
flu
ended up
arrived?
not being as
200,000 people
lethal
didn't
as the
die.
coronavirus. But before the end of the year, when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu. If the swine flu had been as lethal as the coronavirus, in 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives. His own chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say last year that it was pure luck.
We
They
haven't
did,
even
quote,
finished the
everything
year
possibly
out yet.
wrong. And we learned from that. They left the strategic national stockpile empty. They left an empty and hollow plan, but we
Thank you,
still
Vice
learned
President
from it.
Pence.
And I think
An
American
empty and
people
hollow
once
plan.
again can be
Vice
proud
That we had a
Pence,
plan,
I'm
we
sorry,
just
what we
didn't
have
follow
done.
it.
And Senator, please
Thank you, Vice
stop
President
undermining
Pence.
confidence in a vaccine.
Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked
Sure.
Vice President Pence, which is, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with Vice President Biden about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, and if you win the election next month, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
So let me tell you, first of all, the day I got the call from Joe Biden, it was actually a Zoom call, asking me to serve with him on this ticket.
Look
was
at her.
probably
She's
one of
a
the most
human being.
memorable days of my life. I thought about my mother, who came to the United States at the age of 19, gave birth to me at the age of 25 at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. And the thought that I'd be sitting here right now, I know would make her proud, and she must be looking down on this. Joe and I were raised in a very similar way. We were raised with values that are about hard work,
Every wall will fall.
about
All those things are
the value
true.
and the
However, we
dignity of
will
public
attack
service,
Kamala Harris
and about the importance of fighting for the dignity
on
of
her
all
policy
people. And I think Joe
after
asked
the
me to
election,
serve with
okay?
him because, I have
right
a
now,
career that
she's looking
included
good. She's
being
being
elected the first
charismatic,
woman district
and the
attorney
person
in
she's
San
running
Francisco,
against
where I
is
created
very
models
obviously a
of
human
innovation
simulacrum
for law
created
enforcement
by
in terms
dark
of reform of
magic.
the criminal justice system. I was elected the first woman of
I actually
color
think
and
that
black woman
Kamala will be
elected
easier to
Attorney
bully
General
than
of the state of
Biden,
California, where I
specifically
ran the
because she
second
has a
largest
much
Department of
longer
Justice in the
career
United
ahead of her
States,
than Biden
second
does.
only to the United States Department of Justice.
So
From there,
she's
I
much
took
more
on everything
responsive
from
to
transnational
progressive
criminal organizations
pushes.
to the big banks that
Also,
were taking advantage of homeowners.
She
to
is
for-profit
one of the
colleges
more
that were
progressive
taking advantage of veterans.
senators.
And then,
in-
of course,
in
now I serve in the United
Senate.
States Senate as only the
So,
second black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. I serve on the
she'd
Senate
probably be
Intelligence
more
Committee, where I've been
responsive
in
to being
regular
pushed
receipt
in a
of
progressive
classified
direction.
information about threats to our nation and hotspots around the world. I've traveled the world. I've met with our soldiers in war zones. And I think Joe has asked me to serve with him because he knows that we share a purpose which is about lifting up the American people. And after the 4 years that we have seen of Donald Trump unifying our country around our common values and principles.
Thank you, Senator Harris. You know, neither President Trump nor Vice President Biden has released a sort of detailed health information that had become the modern norm until the 2016 election. And in recent days, President Trump's doctors have given misleading answers or refused to answer basic questions about his health. And my question to each of you in turn is this information voters deserve to know? Vice President Pence, would you like to go first?
Well, Susan, thank you. And let me say, on behalf of the President and the First Lady, how moved we've all been by the outpouring of prayers and concern for the President. And I do believe it's emblematic of the prayers and the concern that have ushered forth for every American impacted by the coronavirus. But the care the President received at Walter Reed Hospital, the White House doctors, was exceptional. And the transparency that they practiced all along the way will continue. The American people have a right to know about the health and well-being of their president, and will continue to do that.
Sure,
I'm
bud.
just extremely grateful and was more than a little moved by the broad and bipartisan support. And Senator, I want to thank you and Joe Biden
he was
for your
probably like
expressions, genuine
firing
concern.
one off in the bathroom
And I
at the
also wanna
shot
congratulate you,
at the mere thought
as I did on
of
that phone call,
becoming president while
on
Trump is
the historic
indisposed.
nature of your nomination.
Thank you.
I never expected to be on this stage 4 years ago, so I know the feeling. But the reality is we've got an election before the American people in the midst of this challenging year. And the stakes have never been higher, but I think the choice has never been clearer.
I want to give
The
Senator
choice has
Harris a
never
chance
been
to
clearer.
respond to the same
Okay.
question I asked, which
Okay,
is,
my
do
dude.
voters have a right to know more detailed health information about presidential candidates and especially about presidents, especially when they're facing some kind of challenge?
Absolutely, and that's why Joe Biden has been so incredibly transparent, and certainly by contrast, the president has not, both in terms of health records, but also let's look at taxes. We now know, because of great investigative journalism, that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. When I first heard about it, I literally said, "You mean $750,000?" And it was like, no, $750. We now know Donald Trump owes.
Pence
and
is
is
like
in
just
debt
slowly shaking his
for
head while also
$400
thinking he
million.
wants to be
And
doing
just so
literally
everyone is
anything
clear,
else right
when
now.
we say in debt, it means you owe money to somebody. And it'd be really good to know who the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, owes money to, because the American people have
True.
a right to know what is influencing the president's decisions. And is he making those decisions?
Jimmy
on the
Carter
best
had to
interest of
sell
the
his
American
family's
people, of
peanut
you,
farm so
or
that he wasn't
self-interest?
beholden
So,
to
Susan, I'm glad you asked about transparency.
any special
because
interests.
it has to be across the board. Joe has been incredibly
current
transparent
president is
over many
almost
years.
$500 million
The
in
one
debt.
thing we all know about
In
Joe,
personal debt.
he puts
Like,
it all
he
out
himself.
there.
Not his
he is
business.
honest,
He himself
is
owes $500 million.
forthright. But Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been about covering up everything.
Thank you, Senator Harris. I want to give you a chance to respond. Vice
Do you
President.
think that someone who owns that debt
Joe Biden spent 47
is
years in public life.
is able to
I respect
influence
your
the president? I
public
think so.
service as well.
Thank you.
The American people have a president who's a businessman. He's a job creator. Who's paid
Hey,
tens of
thank you for the
millions
sub,
of dollars in taxes.
Nindrain.
Payroll taxes, property taxes. He's created tens of thousands of American jobs. And the president said those public reports are not accurate. And the president's also released literally stacks of financial disclosures the American people can review just as the law allows. But the distinction here is that Joe Biden, 47 years in public service, compared to President Donald Trump, who brought all of that experience 4 years ago.
Thank you,
And
Vice President.
turned this economy around by cutting taxes, rolling back regulation,
Thank you,
unleashing
Vice
American
President
energy,
Pence.
fighting for free and fair trade.
Yeah,
and all
who
of
got
that's
the
on
tax
line
cuts?
if Joe Biden
And
Kamala
maybe one of the
Harris.
people who
that's
got
a
those
good
tax
segue
cuts
into our third
owed-
topic,
owned
which is
Trump's
about the economy.
$500 million
This has been
in debt.
another aspect of life for Americans that's been so affected by this coronavirus. We have a jobs crisis brewing.
My
On
blood
Friday, we learned
pressure,
that the
it's going up.
unemployment rate had declined to 7.9% in September, but the job growth had stalled, and that was before the latest round of layoffs and furloughs in the airline industry at Disney and elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of discouraged workers have stopped looking for work. Nearly 11 million jobs that existed at the beginning of the year haven't been replaced. Those hardest hit include Latinos, Blacks, and women. Senator Harris, the Biden-Harris campaign has proposed new programs to boost the economy, and you would pay for that new spending by raising $4 trillion in taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations. Some economists warn that could curb entrepreneurial ventures that fuel growth and create jobs. Would raising taxes put the recovery at risk? And you have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
Thank you. On the issue of the economy, I think there couldn't be a more fundamental difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden believes you measure the health and the strength of America's economy based on the health and the strength of the American worker and the American family. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who measures the strength of the economy based on how rich people are doing, which is why he passed a tax bill benefiting
Also,
the
it's
top
not just
1%
Trump,
and the
it's the
biggest
entire
corporations
GOP.
of America, leading to a $2 trillion deficit that the American people are going to have to pay for.
Yep.
On day one, Joe Biden will repeal that tax bill. He'll get rid of it. And what he'll do with the money is invest it
see.
in the American people. And through a plan that
That'd
is
be
about
nice.
investing in infrastructure, something that Donald Trump said he would do. I remember hearing about some infrastructure week. I don't think it ever happened. But Joe Biden will do that. He'll invest in infrastructure. It's about upgrading our roads and bridges, but also investing in clean energy and renewable energy. Joe is going to invest that money in what we need to do around innovation. There was a time when our country believed in science and invested in research and development so that we
This
were
is just
an
a
innovation
blank
leader
slate
on
with
the
like
globe.
the tiniest
Joe Biden
smirk.
will use that money to invest in education.
But like
So, for
everything she's
example,
saying sounds
if folks
really
wanna
good,
go to a
actually.
two-year community
Get 'em,
college, it will
Kamala.
be free.
Get 'em.
If you come from a family that makes less than $125,000, you'll go to a public university for free. And across the board, we'll make sure that if you have student loan debt, it's cut by $10,000. That's how Joe Biden thinks about the economy, which is
No,
about
no,
investing
an
in
Indreen.
the people of our country.
Pence didn't have a
as opposed to
stroke,
passing
but
a tax bill,
he is
which
a
had the benefit
evil
of letting
simulacrum
American
created by a
corporations
wizard,
go
so-
offshore to do their business.
Thank you,
You're
Senator
welcome.
Harris. Vice President Pence, your administration has been predicting a rapid and robust recovery, but the latest economic report suggests that's not happening. Should Americans be braced for an economic comeback that is going to take not months, but a year or more? You have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
Yes.
When President Trump and I took office,
The answer
America
is
had gone through the
yes.
slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression. Because when Joe Biden was vice president, they tried to tax and spend and regulate and bail our way back to a growing economy. President Trump cut taxes across the board. Despite what Senator Harris says,
Wait, what do
the
you
average
call?
American family
Wait,
of four had $2,000 in savings in taxes.
they gave
And
trillions of
With the
dollars
rise
to
in
rich
wages
people
that occurred,
in the Trump
most predominantly
administration.
for
Trillions.
blue-collar, hardworking Americans, the average household income
And then they're
for a family of
attributing
four
the
increased
recovery
by
to that.
$4,000 following President Trump's tax cuts. But America, you just heard Senator Harris tell you, on
My
day
tax
one,
bill actually didn't go
Joe
down
Biden's
at
gonna
all.
raise your taxes.
So
It's really remarkable to think, Susan. I mean, right after a time where we're going through a pandemic that lost 22 million jobs at the height, we've already
here's the thing:
added
the
back
incredible thing that
11.6
Republicans
million
do
jobs.
is they
Because
equate
we had a president who cut taxes,
repealing
rolled back
tax cuts
regulation,
for the
unleashed
rich
American energy, fought for free and fair
to
trade, and
taxing
secured $4
low-income
trillion
people
from the
more,
Congress of the
or
United
working-class
States
people,
to give
or
direct
even
payments
middle-class
to
people
families,
more.
save 50 million jobs through the Paycheck
It's like this
Protection
weird,
Program.
like,
We literally
almost
have
a Jedi
spared no
mind
expense
trick.
to help the American people and the American worker through this. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris
Spared no
want to raise
expense.
taxes. They want to
Holy
bury
shit.
our economy under a $2 trillion Green
They were
New
quibbling
Deal,
over like
which you were one of the
$100 a
original
week for people out
co-sponsors
of
in the
who are
United
out of
States
work.
Senate. They want to abolish fossil fuels and
Yes.
ban fracking, which would
Yes.
cost hundreds of thousands of American jobs all
You
across
know
the
what would
heartland.
create hundreds
And
of
Joe
thousands of
Biden wants to
American
go back
jobs?
to the economic surrender to China that when we took
Adapting
office,
our economy to
half
run
our
off of green
international trade
energy.
deficit
That
was
would
with
create
China
far more
alone.
jobs.
And Joe Biden wants to
We have like
repeal all of the
5,000
tariffs
coal miners
that
left in the
President
United
Trump put into
States.
effect to fight for American jobs and American workers. Joe Biden says democracy's on the ballot. Make no mistake about it, Susan. The American economy, the American comeback is on the ballot with 4 more years of growth
Thank you,
and
sir.
opportunity,
Thank you,
4
Vice
more years of President Donald Trump. 2021
Thank
is
you,
going
Vice
to be the
President
biggest
Pence.
economic year in the history of this country.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
Okay, but
Senator
economic
Harris.
gains
Well, I mean, I thought we saw enough of it in last week's
or
debate,
losses
but I
are
think this is
delayed.
supposed to be a
So the
debate based on
policies
fact
of
and truth.
today
And the truth and the
will
fact is, Joe Biden
negatively
has been
affect
very
us
clear.
tomorrow.
He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000
He said he's
a
going to
year.
repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well, wait,
I'm speaking.
it'd be important if you said the truth.
I'm speaking.
Joe Biden said twice
Get
in
him,
the debate
Queen.
last week that he's going to
Get him.
repeal the Trump tax cuts. That was tax cuts that gave
Where's the
average
moderator
working
in
family
this? Come on now.
$2,000 in a tax break every single year.
That is,
Senator,
that is
that's the math.
absolutely not true. That
Is he
tax
only
bill-
Yeah,
cutting-
Kamala is
he only
doing
gonna
very well
repeal
in this
part of
debate.
the Trump tax cuts?
If you don't mind letting me finish.
And it's
we
aided
can
by
have
the
a
fact
conversation, okay?
Please.
it's
Okay.
aided by the fact that she acts like a
Joe
human
Biden will
being.
not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that.
He should.
Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act that brought America back. And now the Trump-Pence administration wants to take credit when they rode the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term. Of course, now the economy is a complete disaster. But
Sure.
Joe Biden, on the one hand, did that. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who has reigned over a recession that is being compared to the Great Depression. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who was responsible with President Barack Obama for the Affordable Care Act.
Good point.
Which brought health care to over 20 million Americans and protected people with pre-existing conditions. And what it also did is it saved those families who otherwise were going bankrupt because of hospital bills they could not afford. On the
Pence-
other hand,
Pence
Donald
kind of
Trump,
walked
who's
into
in
this
court
trap.
right now, trying to get rid of
Thank you, Senator
trying to
Harris.
get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which means that you will lose protections if you have pre-existing conditions. And this is very important, Susan.
Yes,
and it's
but we
important
need to
clear-
give, we need to give Vice President
I'd
Pence a
just like
chance
to,
to
he
respond.
interrupted me, and I'd like to just finish, please. If you have a pre-existing condition, heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer, they're coming for you. If you love someone who has a pre-existing
nonsense.
condition,
Thank you. Thank
they're
you, Senator
coming for
Harris.
you. If you are under the
Excellent.
age of 26 on your parents' coverage, they're coming for you.
Senator
Excellent.
Harris, thank you.
You're
Let me
welcome.
give you a
Good.
chance to respond.
Well, I hope we have a chance to talk about health care because Obamacare was a disaster. The American people remember it well. And President Trump and I have a plan to improve health care and to protect
What
protect
is your
pre-existing
plan?
conditions
Because
for
they've been
every
talking about it
American.
for years.
But look, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. You yourself said on multiple occasions when you were running for president that you would ban fracking. Joe Biden looked at a supporter in the eye and pointed and said, I guarantee that we will abolish fossil fuels. They have a $2 trillion
Yeah, we
version of the
should.
Green New Deal.
We
Susan.
should,
The
though.
New newspaper USA Today
planet
said
is dying.
Really wasn't that very different from the original Green New Deal. More taxes, more regulation, banning fracking, abolishing fossil fuel, crushing American energy, and economic surrender to China is a prescription for economic decline. President Trump and I will keep America growing. The V-shaped recovery that's underway
Keep America
right
growing
now
right up
will
until
continue
the
with 4 more
flaming
years of President
firestorm
Donald Trump.
engulfs
Thank
the
you very, very
earth
much,
and
Vice
destroys us
President Pence.
all.
Once again, you've provided the
Created
perfect
by our
segue
own
to a new
hubris
topic, which is climate
Dedication to
change.
capital.
And Vice President Pence, I'd like to pose the first question to you. This year, we've seen record-setting
fracking
hurricanes
for
in
the record
South.
literally
Another one,
causes
Hurricane Delta,
earthquakes
is now threatening the
and
Gulf.
also
And we have
releases
seen
tons of
record-setting
harmful gases
wildfires
into the
in
atmosphere.
West. Do you believe, as the scientific community has concluded, that man-made climate change has made wildfires bigger, hotter, and more deadly, and have made hurricanes wetter, slower, and more damaging? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. Well, first, I'm very proud of our record on the environment and on conservation.
How can
According to all of the best estimates, our
the
air
transition
and
between
land are
these two
cleaner than
topics
any time ever recorded. Our water is among the cleanest in the world. And just a little while ago, the president signed the Outdoors Act. It's the largest investment in our public lands and public parks in 100 years.
I'm losing it, bro.
So President Trump has made a commitment to conservation and to the environment. Now, with regard to climate change, the climate is changing. But the issue is, what's the cause and what do we do about it?
Well,
Trump has
banning
made it clear that we're
fracking
gonna continue
and
to listen to
abolishing
science.
fossil fuels is a
Now,
start.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would put us back in the Paris Climate Accord. They'd impose the Green New Deal,
Yeah.
which would crush American
I mean, I wish they
energy,
would.
increase the energy costs of American families in their homes, and literally would crush American jobs. And
Ashley,
President
the
Trump and
color
I
of
believe
Mike
that
Pence's
the
sky is
progress
whatever
that we
color
have
it was
made
in
a cleaner environment
all along the
has
West
been
Coast
happening
when the fires
precisely
were
because
raging.
we have a strong free market economy. You know, what's remarkable is the United States has reduced CO2 more than the countries that are still in the Paris Climate Accord, but we've done it through innovation. And we've done it
This
through
doesn't
natural
matter.
gas and fracking,
This do-
which, Senator, the American people can go look at the record. I
Nope.
know Joe Biden
Nope.
says
Fracking is
otherwise
bad.
now, as you do, but the both of you repeatedly committed to abolishing fossil fuel and banning of fracking. And so by
Releasing more
creating
oil
kind of
into the
American
atmosphere is bad.
innovation, we're actually
Okay,
steering
guys,
toward a
it-
stronger and better environment. With regard to wildfires, President Trump and I believe that forest management has to be front and center, and even Governor Gavin Newsom from your state has agreed we've got to work on forest management. And with regard to hurricanes, the National Oceanic Administration tells us that actually as difficult as they are,
Thank you, Vice
I'm-
President.
there are no more
I'm so
hurricanes
angry I
today
don't
than there
actually
were
know what to
100 years ago.
Thank you.
But many of the climate
Vice
alarmists,
President
The
Yes,
pivot
sir.
between these two
and
topics was
wildfires
so
to try and
wild.
Thank
sell
you,
their
Vice
bill of
President.
goods of
Yes.
a Green New Deal, and President Trump and I are going to always put
Thank you,
American
Vice
jobs and
President.
American
Yes.
workers first.
Yeah,
Senator
American
Harris,
jobs and
as
American
the
workers
Vice
first,
President
right up
mentioned, you
until we all
co-sponsored
die
the
in the
Green New Deal
firestorm.
Congress. But Vice President Biden said in last week's debate that he does not support the Green New Deal. But if you look at the Biden-Harris campaign website, it describes the Green New Deal as a crucial framework. What exactly would be the stance of a Biden-Harris administration toward the Green New Deal? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Sure. So first of all, I will
They're gonna
repeat,
disavow it.
and the American people know that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact. That is a
should.
fact.
You should.
I will repeat that Joe Biden has been very clear that he thinks about growing jobs, which is why he will not increase taxes for anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. Joe Biden's economic plan, Moody's, which is a reputable Wall Street firm, has said will create 7 million more jobs than Donald Trump's. And part of those jobs that will be created by Joe Biden are going to be about clean energy and renewable energy. Because you see, Joe understands that the west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed because of floods. And so Joe believes, again, in science. I'll tell you something, Susan. I served, when I first got to the Senate, on the committee that's responsible for the environment. Do you know this administration took the word science off the website and then took the phrase climate change off the website?
True,
We
actually.
have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but
Here's
we're
the
also
thing,
going to create jobs.
they do believe in
Donald
it.
Trump, when
They
asked
are
about
just
the wildfires
purposely
in California,
obfuscating it
and-
so
and
that
the
they can
question
push
was, you know, the
through
science is telling us this.
pro-capital
You know what Donald
agenda.
Trump said? Science doesn't know. So let's talk about who is prepared to lead
At the
our
very
country
least,
over the
Democrats
course of the
also
next
serve
4
capital,
years
but
on
at
what
the
is
very
an
least, they are
existential
willing
threat
to move
us as human
in a
beings.
direction
Joe is about
that helps
saying
us
we're gonna
get closer
invest that
to
in
stopping
renewable energy,
climate
it's gonna be
change
about the creation
apocalypse.
of millions of
Okay?
jobs. We will achieve net zero emissions by 2050, carbon
soon
neutral
enough.
by 2035. Joe has a plan. This has been a lot of talk from the Trump administration, and really it has been to go backward instead of forward. We will also re-enter the climate agreement with pride.
Senator Harris just said that climate change is an existential threat. Vice President Pence, do you believe that climate change poses an existential threat?
As I said, Susan, the climate is changing. We'll follow the science. But once again, Senator Harris is
Not
denying
answering the
fact that they're going
question.
to raise taxes. on
Not
every American. Joe
answering the
Biden said
question.
twice in the debate last week
Not
that
answering
on
the
day one,
question.
he was going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. Those tax cuts delivered $2,000
He
in
can't
tax relief
say
to the
that
average family
climate
of
change
four
is an
across
existential
America.
threat.
And with regard
Because
to
he just
banning
said
fracking, I
that
just
they're
recommend
putting
that people
jobs
look at the
first.
record. You yourself
They're
said
putting
repeatedly that you would ban
forcing
fracking.
people
You
to
were the
work
first
before
Senate co-sponsor
ensuring
of
that
the
they have a
Green New
planet
Deal.
to work
And while
on.
Joe Biden
So,
denied
like,
the Green New Deal, Susan, thank you for pointing out.
He can't.
the
He
Green
can't
New Deal
answer
is
it.
on their campaign website.
Can't do
And
it.
as USA Today said, it's essentially the same plan as you co-sponsored with AOC when she submitted it in the Senate.
It's not the same
And you just heard the senator say that she's going to resubmit
The Green New
America
Deal
to the Paris Climate
called for
Accord.
way more money than $2 trillion.
The American people have
And
always
also
cherished our
high-speed
environment. We'll
infrastructure
continue
and
to
public
cherish it.
infrastructure.
We've made great progress
And also
reducing
ban
CO2
fracking.
emissions through
It's not the
American
same
innovation
plan.
and the development of natural
It's
gas
not.
through fracking. We don't need a massive $2 trillion Green New Deal that would impose all new mandates on American businesses and American families.
Thank you.
Joe Biden wants us
Thank
to
you, Vice
retrofit
President Pence.
4 million
I mean,
Thank you,
American
Vice
he's
President.
probably
business buildings.
he's probably been
It
studying
makes
up
no
prior to
sense.
the
It will
debate in
cost
Dream.
jobs. President Trump
Thank
is
you,
going to
Vice
put
President
America
Pence.
first. He's going to put jobs first, and we're going to take care of our environment and follow the science.
Thank
But,
you, Vice
you know,
President
on the
Pence.
issue of jobs,
Senator Harris.
let's talk about that. The vice president earlier referred to, as part of what he thinks is an accomplishment, the president's trade war with China. You lost that trade war. You lost it. What ended up happening is because of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Farmers have experienced bankruptcy because of it. We are in a manufacturing recession because of it. And when we look at where this administration has been, there are estimates that by the end of the term of this administration, they will have lost more jobs than almost any other presidential administration. And the American people know what I'm talking about. You know.
True.
I think about 20-year-olds. You know, we have a 20-year-old, a 20-something-year-old, who are coming out of high school and college right now, and you're wondering, is there going to be a job there for me? We're looking at people
If you're young
who are
out there and you're
trying to
watching this
figure out
stream,
how they're going to pay rent
probably
by the end
not.
of the month. Almost half
I've been
of
looking for a
American
job for
renters
like a year now,
are worried
so-
about whether they're going to be able to pay
A.
rent by the end of the month. This is where the economy is in America right now, and it is because of the catastrophe and the failure of leadership of this administration.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you just 15 seconds to respond, because then I want to move on to
Well, I'd love to respond. Look, lost the trade war with China. Joe Biden never fought it. Joe Biden has been a cheerleader for communist China through over the last several decades.
China's
And
capitalist.
again, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your own
This
facts.
is, by the
Joe
way,
Biden was
calling
vice
calling
president. We
China
lost
communist is like
200,000
calling
manufacturing jobs.
Nazi
And
Germany
President Obama said
socialist
they were
because
never
it
coming
had
back. He said we
like
needed a
national
magic wand to bring them
socialism
back.
in like the
In our first 3
the
years after we cut taxes,
political,
rolled back regulation, unleashed American
lines
energy,
that they
this
talked about, like
administration
that
saw
they called themselves
500,000
national socialists.
manufacturing
So
jobs
obviously they
created.
must have been
And
socialist.
that's exactly the kind of
Like
growth
that's
we're
the
gonna
same
continue
kind
to
of
see as we
logic
bring
here
our
in
nation
calling
through
China
this
like
pandemic.
communist.
The Green New
They have a
Deal,
capitalist
massive
economy now,
mandates,
guys.
the Paris Climate Accord.
China
It's
is
gonna kill jobs
capitalist.
this time, just like it killed
It's
jobs.
actually
I
doing
just need to
capitalism
respond very
better than the
quickly.
United
15
States,
seconds.
which is
Thank you.
why they
Thank you.
won the trade war against
Joe Biden
us. Okay.
is responsible for saving America's auto industry, and you voted against it. So let's set the record straight. Thank you.
I'd like to talk about China. We have, as our next topic, we have no more complicated or consequential foreign relationship than the one with China. It is a huge market for American agricultural goods. It's a potential partner in dealing with climate change in North Korea. And in a video tonight, President Trump again blamed it for the coronavirus, saying China will pay. Vice President Pence, how would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Competitors, adversaries, enemies? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Susan. Well, before I leave that, let me speak to voting records if I can. You know, everybody knows that NAFTA cost literally thousands of American factories to close. We saw automotive jobs go south of the border. President Trump fought to renegotiate NAFTA. And the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is now the law of the land.
Now, I don't know a
American
whole lot
people
about
deserve to
this,
know
but it seems
Senator
like
Kamala
that
Harris was
agreement
one of
is
only 10
basically still
members
the
of
same.
Senate to vote against the USMCA. It was a huge win for American auto workers. It was a huge win for American farmers, especially dairy in the upper Midwest. But Senator, you said it didn't go far enough on climate change, that you put your radical environmental agenda ahead of American auto workers and
Yeah,
ahead of
a
American
radical agenda is
jobs.
ensuring that we have a
People deserve to know
planet
that. It's
for our
probably why
grandkids.
Newsweek
Okay.
magazine said that Kamala Harris was the most liberal member of the United States Senate in 2019, more liberal than Bernie Sanders, more liberal than any of the others. In
Man,
the United
calling
States Senate.
calling
So,
Bernie
now, with regard
Sanders
to
a
China,
liberal is just insulting.
Susan, first and foremost, China is to blame for the coronavirus.
Holy shit. It
And
doesn't
President
matter.
Trump is not happy about it. He's made that very clear. Made it clear again.
By the
today.
way, just as an
China and
FYI,
the World
one of the
Health
earliest
Organization did not play
outbreaks of the
straight with the
Spanish
American
flu
people.
was in a
They did not
military
let our
base in
personnel
Kansas.
into China
And it's called
to
the
get
Spanish
information on
flu
the coronavirus
because
until the middle of
Spain was the
February.
first place that
Fortunately, President Trump
couldn't contain it
dealing
in a
with China
way,
from
and
the
it
outset
just
of
kind
this
of
administration,
got
standing
announced to
up
the
to
world that
China,
they
who
had
had
this
been taking
disease.
advantage of America for
But it
decades
actually,
in the wake
one of the
of
original
Joe Biden's
places it came
cheerleading
from
for
was the
China.
United States.
President Trump made that decision
Should we be
before
paying
the end of
reparations
January
for
to
the
suspend
Spanish
all travel
flu?
from China. And
If you
again,
think that's
the American
crazy,
people deserve to know
then
Joe
we shouldn't be
Biden
calling it the
opposed
China
President
virus
Trump's
or whatever.
decision to suspend all travel from China. He said it was hysterical. He said it was
Thank you, Vice
xenophobic.
President Pence.
But President Trump has
Vice President
stood
Pence,
up
your
to
time is
China.
up.
We're going to continue to stand strong.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
We want to improve the relationship, but we're going to level the playing field, and we're going to hold
Vice President
China
Pence.
accountable for what they did to America with the coronavirus.
Thank you. Senator Harris, let me ask you
They're talking about it like it is
that I asked the
a
Vice President. How would you describe
purposeful
our fundamental relationship
viral
with China?
attack
Are we
when it's
competitors,
not. This is
adversaries,
just a way
enemies?
to reframe their own
We'll have
incompetence.
2 minutes uninterrupted.
Susan, the Trump administration's perspective and approach to China has resulted in the loss of American lives, American jobs, and America's standing.
Oops. Sorry,
There's
guys.
a
I don't know
weird
what's
obsession
happening.
that President Trump has had with getting rid of whatever accomplishment was achieved by President Obama and Vice President Biden. For example, they created within the White House an office that basically was responsible for monitoring pandemics. They got rid of it.
Not true.
There was a team of disease experts that President Obama and Vice President Biden dispatched to China to monitor what is now predictable and what might happen. They pulled them out. We now are looking
Both
at
those things are true, by the way.
210,000 Americans who have lost their lives. Let's look at the job situation. We mentioned before the trade deal, the trade war, they wanted to call it, with China. It resulted in the loss of over 300 manufacturing jobs and a manufacturing recession.
300,000.
And the American consumer
300,000.
paying thousands of dollars more for goods because of that failed war that they called it. Then let's talk about standing. Pew, a reputable research firm, has done an analysis that shows that leaders of all of our formerly allied countries have now decided that they hold in greater esteem and respect Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, than they do Donald Trump, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. This is where we are today because of a failure of leadership by this administration.
Senator
Sure.
Harris, we've seen
Get 'em.
changes in the role of the United States in terms of global leadership over the past 4 years. And of course, times do change. What's your definition? We've seen strains with China, of course, as the Vice President mentioned. We've seen strains with our traditional allies in NATO and elsewhere. What is your definition of the role of American leadership
Heck yeah,
in
Ashley.
2020?
Vote Democrat down
So,
ballot.
You know, Joe is, I
Or-
love talking
and
with
do
Joe
your
about
research
a
on
lot of
local
these issues.
elections,
And,
okay?
Joe, I think he said it quite well. He
Because
says,
sometimes you can
foreign
get more
policy
progressive
might
people
sound
in at the
complicated,
bottom.
but really it's relationships. So just think about it as relationships. And so we know this in our personal and professional relationships. You got to keep your word to your friends. Got to be loyal to your friends. People who've stood with you, got to stand with them.
That's right,
Gotta
chat.
know who
I
your
stand with you,
adversaries
chat.
are.
Okay?
And keep them in check.
I got your back. I'm keeping you in
But
check,
what we've
too.
seen with Donald Trump is that he has betrayed our friends and embraced dictators around the world. Let's take, for example, Russia.
Oh, I thought she was
So,
going to bring up North Korea.
Russia, I serve on the
Talk about the
Intelligence
love
Committee
letters
of
they
the
send
United
to
States Senate.
one another.
America's intelligence community told us Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States in 2016 and is playing in 2020. Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, said the same. But Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief of the United States of America, prefers to take the word of Vladimir Putin over the word of the American intelligence community. You look at our friends at NATO. He has walked away from agreements. You can look at the Iran
True.
nuclear deal,
Oh my
which
gosh.
now
Remember
has
when
put
he
us in a
tried to
position
extort NATO for
where we are
money,
less
for
safe
literal
because they
protection
are
money?
building up what might end
I
up
just
being a
remembered that was a
significant
thing.
nuclear
That's insane.
arsenal.
That's
We
insane.
were in that deal, guys. We were in the Iran nuclear deal with friends, with allies around the country. And because of Donald Trump's unilateral approach to foreign policy, coupled with his isolationism, he pulled us out and has made America less safe. So, Susan, it's about relationships. And the thing that has always been part of the strength of our nation, in addition to our great military.
Yeah, if you haven't gotten your ballot yet, make sure you probably want to drop it off at your polling
what it
station.
means to be honest.
Thank you.
I wouldn't rely on mail if you still don't have your ballot.
Well, thank you. Well, President Trump kept his word when we moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel. When
Yeah,
Joe Biden was
you
vice
got to
president,
make
we
sure
promised
that
to do
ancient
and we
prophecy
did.
is fulfilled, so
We
that
stood strong with our allies.
apocalypse
but we've
happens.
been demanding. NATO is now contributing more to our common defense than ever before, thanks to President Trump's leadership.
Trump
We've strengthened
extorted
our
them.
alliances across the Asia Pacific, and we've stood strong against those who would do us harm. You know, when President Trump
head
came into
hurts.
office, ISIS had captured an area of the Middle East the size of Pennsylvania. But President Trump unleashed the American military, and our armed forces destroyed the ISIS caliphate and took down their leader, al-Baghdadi, without one American casualty. Al-Baghdadi was responsible.
Remember one of
for
the
the death
very
of
first
thousands.
things that Trump did
But
at the
notably, America's
beginning
hearts today
of
with the family of
his
Caleb Miller,
administration, like
the
his
parents of
first
which are here with
military
us
action that
tonight
he
in Salt Lake
ordered
City.
was a strike on
two
a
of the
compound
ISIS
where like
killers
an
responsible
ISIS
for
leader
Caleb
was,
Miller's
and
murder
turns out
were brought
like
to justice
one
in
of the
the
kids
United
that was at the
States.
camp
Jihadi John
was an
was killed
American
on the battlefield
citizen,
along with the other
and they got
leader.
blown up. You
The
remember that?
reality is that
'Cause I remember that.
when Joe Biden was vice president, we had an opportunity to save Caleb Miller. It breaks my heart to reflect on it, but the military came into the Oval Office, presented a plan. They said they knew where Caleb was. Baghdadi had held her for 18 months, abused her mercilessly before they killed her. But when Joe Biden was vice president, they hesitated for a month. And when armed forces finally went in, it was clear she'd been moved 2 days earlier. And her family says with a heart that broke the heart of every American that if President Donald Trump had been president, they believe Kayla would be alive today.
Thank you, Vice
Look, we
President.
destroyed the ISIS caliphate. And you talk about re-entering the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, the last administration transferred $1.8 billion to the leading state sponsor
Thank you, Vice
of
President.
terrorism. President Donald Trump got us out of the deal.
Thank you, Vice President.
Iran
And
fought
when
against
Qasem
ISIS
Soleimani was traveling
too.
to Baghdad
Thank you,
to do
Vice President
harm
Pence.
to Americans, President Donald Trump took
Thank you,
him
Vice
out.
President Pence.
And America is
Also,
safer.
that
Our
money
allies are
was
safer.
already
And we're-
Iran's.
President
Okay?
Donald Trump will
I-
never
Iran-
Thank you, Vice
It was
President.
Take
Iranian
action.
money
I would
in
like
the
to give
first place.
Senator Harris a chance to respond, but not at such great length because, of course, there are other topics we want to talk about.
But I would like equal time.
Yes,
Thank you.
please go ahead.
First of all, to the Mueller family.
Get 'em, Kamala.
I know about your daughter's case, and I'm so sorry.
Are they
so
are they
sorry.
sitting in the audience? Is she looking at them right now?
What happened to her is awful. And it should have never happened. And I know Joe feels the same way. And I know that President Obama feels the same way. But you mentioned Soleimani. Let's start there. So after the strike on Soleimani,
Get him.
there was a counter strike on our troops in Iraq. And they suffered serious brain injuries. And do you know what Donald Trump dismissed them as? Headaches. And this is about a pattern of Donald Trump's, where he has referred to our men who are serving in our military as suckers and losers.
Get him.
Donald Trump, who went to Arlington Cemetery and stood above the graves of our fallen heroes.
Stuff
and
is boring
said,
to me, but
"What's in
I'm
it
sure
for
it's
them?"
effective for some people.
Because, of course, he only thinks about what's in it for him. Let's take what he said about John McCain, a
Get him.
great American hero.
Get him.
And Donald Trump says he doesn't deserve to be called a hero because he was a prisoner of war. And this is very important when you want to talk about who is the current commander-in-chief and what they care about and what they don't care about. Public reporting that Russia had bounties on the heads of American soldiers. And you know what a bounty is? It's somebody puts a price on your head and they will pay it if you are killed. And Donald Trump had talked at least 6
does she have
times
something in her
to
teeth?
Vladimir Putin and
I think
never
she has
brought
something
up
like
the
in her
subject.
bottom teeth.
Joe Biden would never do that.
Thank
Joe
you.
Biden would, but Joe Biden would hold Russia to account for any threat to our nation's security or to our troops who are sacrificing their lives for the sake of our democracy and our safety.
Thank you, Senator Harris. This is such an important issue, but we have other important issues as well. And
Susan,
I want to make sure we have a chance
I really have to
talk
respond
about
to that. She has
15 seconds because
Well, I gotta
we're
have
trying
more
to
than
keep.
that. Look.
Well, I'm sorry, but Vice President
Look,
Pence, you've had more time than she's had so far.
Slanders against President Donald Trump
Cut the mic. Do it, Mod.
regarding
Do it, moderator.
men and women of
Cut
our
it.
armed forces are absurd.
I'm sorry, Vice
My
President
son is
Pence.
a captain in the United
it.
States Marine
Do it.
Corps. My
Do it.
son-in-law is deployed in the United States Navy.
Do it.
I can assure all of you,
She's not going to do
the
it.
sons and daughters serving in our military.
I thought she was a
President
Karen.
Donald Trump not only
She's a Karen
respects,
not.
but reveres all of those who serve in our armed forces, and any suggestion otherwise is ridiculous.
But
Let
thank
me
you,
also
Vice
say,
President Pence.
the
Vice
the
President
American
Pence,
people deserve, Susan,
Vice
the
President
American
Pence,
people
I
deserve to
didn't,
know.
Vice President
that-
Pence, I did not,
They
excuse
can't
me,
deny.
Susan, the
I did
American
not
people
create
deserve
the
to know
rules for tonight.
Joe Biden.
Your
and
campaigns agreed to the rules for tonight's debate with the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm here to enforce them, which involves moving from one topic to another, giving roughly equal time to both of you,
Go right
which is what I'm trying very hard to do.
Go right ahead.
So I want to go ahead and move to the next topic, which is an important one, as the last topic was, and that is the Supreme Court.
Okay. Her Karen
On
credentials
Monday,
are
the Senate
restored.
Judiciary
okay?
Committee is scheduled to open hearings on Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. Senator Harris, you'll be there as a member of the committee. Her confirmation would cement the court's conservative majority and make it likely open to more abortion restrictions, even to overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling. Access to abortion would then be up to the states. Vice President Pence, you're the former governor of Indiana. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want Indiana to do? Would you want your home state to ban all abortions? You have 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
Well, thank you for the question, but I'll use a little bit of my time to respond to that very important issue before.
No.
American people deserve to know.
Fine. Whatever.
Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, was responsible for the death of hundreds of American service members. When the opportunity came, we saw him headed to Baghdad to kill more Americans. President Trump didn't hesitate. And Qasem
Just so
Soleimani
you
was
know,
gone.
though,
But you
killing
deserve to know
that
Joe
general
Biden
risked
and Kamala Harris actually criticized
escalating
the
a
decision
war
to take out Qasem
that could kill
Soleimani.
hundreds of thousands
It's really
of Americans.
inexplicable, but
hundreds
with
of
regard to Joe
thousands, maybe
Biden,
millions.
it's explainable.
Because invading Iran
His history records
is
that
a
Joe Biden
way
actually
different prospect
opposed
than
the
invading
raiding
Iraq,
Osama bin
guys.
Laden. It's absolutely
The last
essential
war game that they
we have a
ran
commander-in-chief
involving a
who
conflict between
will not
Iran
hesitate
and the
to
U.S.
act to
military
protect American lives and to
overwhelmingly
protect
went in
American service
favor
members,
of
and that's what
Iran.
you have in
Okay,
President Donald Trump.
it's a very
Now, with
hard
regard
region to fight
the
in.
Supreme Court of the United States. let me say, President Trump and I could not be more enthusiastic.
So killing a guy
the
over
opportunity to see Judge
100,
Amy Coney
200,
Barrett
500
become
deaths
Justice Amy Coney Barrett.
and
She's a
risking
brilliant
hundreds
woman,
of thousands more.
and,
not good.
she
Not
will
a
bring
good
lifetime of
military
experience
calculus
and
right
a
there.
sizable American family to the Supreme Court of the United States. And our hope is, in the hearing next week, unlike Justice Kavanaugh received with treatment from you and others, we hope she gets a fair hearing. And we particularly hope that we don't see the kind of attacks on her Christian faith that we saw before. I mean, the Democrat chairman of the Judiciary Committee before, when Judge Barrett was being confirmed for the Court of Appeals, expressed concern that the dogma of her faith lived loudly in her. Dick Durbin of Illinois said that it was a concern. Senator, I know one of our judicial nominees.
Okay, I know that people are
attacked
trying to
because they were
frame
members
this
of
as a
the
problem
Catholic
with her
Knights of
faith.
Columbus, just because the Knights of Columbus holds pro-life views and
Thank you.
pro-marriage views.
Thank you, Vice President.
So
She
my hope
literally
is that
has an
when the hearing
advisor
takes place,
that her
that-
Thank you,
faith
Vice
advocates
President.
that
Judge
she
Amy
needs
Coney
to
Barrett will be respected,
Thank you,
treated
Vice President.
consult
respectfully,
with on
voted and
every
confirmed
Thank
to the
you.
Supreme Court
major
of the United
Senator
decision.
Harris, you're
So
the
how that
senator
affects
from
a
and
Supreme
former
Court ruling
Attorney
is
General of
actually very
California. So let me
pertinent.
ask you a parallel question to the one I posed to the Vice President. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want California to do? Would you want your home state to enact no restrictions on access to abortion? And you have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, Joe Biden and I are both
Hell
people
yeah.
of faith,
Get an abortion at 7-Eleven.
and it's insulting to suggest that we would knock anyone for their faith. And in fact, Joe, if elected, will be only the second practicing Catholic as President of the United States. On the issue of this nomination, Joe and I are very clear, as are the majority of the American people. We are 27 days before the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And, you know, before, when this conversation has come up, you know, it's been about election year or election time. We're literally in an election. Over 4 million people have voted. People are in the process of voting right now. And so Joe
True.
has been
In this very
clear,
strain.
as the American people are. Let the American people fill that seat in the White House, and then we'll fill that seat on the United States Supreme Court. And to your point, Susan, the issues before us couldn't be more serious. There's the issue of choice, and I will always fight for a woman's right to make a decision about her own body. It should be her decision and not that of Donald Trump and the Vice President, Michael Pence. But let's also look at what else is before the court. It's the Affordable Care Act. Like, literally in the midst of a public health pandemic, when over 210,000 people have died and 7 million people probably have what will be in the future considered a pre-existing condition because you contracted the virus. Donald Trump is in court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act.
The virus has lasting consequences.
And it bears repeating. This means that there will be no more protections if they win for people with pre-existing conditions. This means that over 20 million people will lose your coverage. It means that if you're under the age of 26, you can't stay on your parents' coverage anymore. And here's the thing. The contrast couldn't be more clear. They're trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Joe Biden is saying, let's expand coverage. Let's give you a choice of a public option or private coverage. Let's bring down premiums.
Thank you, Senator
Let's
Harris.
lower Medicare eligibility to 60.
Thank you, Senator.
That's true
Harris.
leadership.
You know, you mentioned
All of those things,
earlier.
not good
Vice
enough,
President
but you
Pence
know
said the
what? They're
president was
better than
committed
nothing.
To maintaining protections for people with pre-existing conditions. But you do have this court case that you are supporting, your administration supporting, that would strike down the Affordable Care Act. The President Trump says that
Exactly,
he's going to protect people
Ninjrin.
with pre-existing conditions, but he has not explained how he would do that. And that was one of the toughest nuts to crack when they were passing the Affordable Care Act. So tell us specifically, how would your administration protect Americans with pre-existing conditions?
They have no
access to
plan
affordable
for this,
insurance
okay,
if
guys?
the Affordable Care Act is struck down?
So he's just going to bullshit.
Well,
here.
thank you, Susan. But let me just say, addressing your very first question, I couldn't be more proud to serve as vice president to a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life.
See, right here, he's just
I'm
wasting
pro-life.
time.
I don't apologize for it.
The previous question was about
This
abortion,
is another one
not
of those
this one.
cases where there's such a dramatic contrast. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support taxpayer funding of abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. Late-term abortion. They want to increase funding to Planned Parenthood.
All the way up to the
America.
no one
Now, for our part, I would never
no one
presume that Judge Amy
advocates
Coney
that
Barrett
if
would rule
under
on the
normal
Supreme Court
circumstances you should be
of
able
the
to
United
abort a
States,
baby
but,
right up until the
we'll
moment of
continue to
birth.
stand
Okay,
strong for the
no
right to
one
life.
does that.
When you speak
Like,
about
this
the Supreme
fear-mongering
Court, though, I
bullshit
think the American
is
people really
incredible.
deserve an answer, Senator Harris. Are you and Joe Biden going to pack the court if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed? I mean, there have been 29
The only answer
vacancies on the
she can
Supreme
make is a
Court during the
non-answer
presidential election
because
years from
they
George
totally
Washington to
should
Barack
if
Obama.
they win.
Presidents have nominated in all 29 cases. But your party is actually openly advocating adding seats to the Supreme Court, which has had
Which
9
has been
seats for
done
150
before.
years if you don't get your way. This is a classic case of if you can't win by the rules, you're going to change the rules. Now, you've refused to answer the question. Joe Biden has refused to answer the question. So I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed at the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more.
Ooh, get
In
him!
1861.
Get
I
him.
could answer the question.
Mr. Vice
get 'em.
President, I'm
Please,
speaking.
very
I'm
fast.
speaking.
Oh, look at how happy she
In
is that he asked that
1864.
question.
One of
Oh,
the,
man.
I think, political
Look at that
heroes,
smile.
certainly of the president, I assume of you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election, and it was 27 days before the election, and a seat became open on the United States Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate. But Honest Abe said it's not the right thing to do. The American people deserve to make the decision about who will be the next president of the United States.
This is the
And then
political
that
equivalent in the
person
U.S.
will
of
select
pulling
who
out
will serve for a lifetime on
like,
the highest court
that person?
of our land.
Jesus
And so Joe and I are very
Christ.
clear. The American people are voting right now, and it should be their decision about
Do
who
you
will
disagree with
serve
Abraham
on
Lincoln?
this most important body for a lifetime.
Thank you,
And the
Senator
American
Harris.
people, Susan, are voting right now. They'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court if you don't get your way in this nomination.
Let's talk about
You
packing.
once
Come
again
on.
gave a non-answer. Joe Biden gave a non-answer.
Trying to answer you
The
now.
American people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is they are going to pack the Supreme Court if they somehow win this election. Men and
Mr.
women,
Vice President,
I got to
I
tell you,
think
people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to reject the Biden-Harris ticket. Come November the 3rd, re-elect President Donald Trump, and we'll stand by that separation of powers in a 9-seat Supreme Court.
Yeah,
Honestly,
let's talk about
this-
packing the court then. Let's talk about the
please.
fact. Yeah, I'm about
Oh.
to. So the Trump-Pence administration has been, because I sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Susan, as you mentioned, and I've witnessed the appointments for lifetime appointments to the federal courts, district courts, courts of appeal. People who are purely ideological, people who have been reviewed by legal professional organizations and found to have been not competent, are substandard. And do you know that of the 50 people who President Trump appointed to the Court of Appeals for lifetime appointments, not one is black? This is what they've been doing. You want to talk about packing a court? Let's have that discussion.
All right, thank you, Senator. Let's go on and talk about the issue of racial justice.
I just want the record to reflect she never answered the question. So I think the American people,
Thank
maybe
you.
in the next debate, Joe Biden will answer the question.
Thank you-
But I think
thank
the
you.
It's
American people
true.
know
She
that.
did.
Thank you,
She
Vice
didn't.
President.
But it's a calculated move. Okay.
In March, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old emergency room technician in Louisville, was shot and killed after police officers
Also,
executing a search warrant
Kamala
on a
Harris
narcotics
bringing up
investigation broke into her
race
apartment.
right before this question.
The police said
Good
they identified
rhetorical move.
themselves. Taylor's boyfriend said he didn't hear them do that. He used a gun registered to him to fire a shot, which wounded an officer. The officers then fired more than 20 rounds into the apartment. They say they were acting in self-defense. None of them have been indicted in connection with her death. Senator Harris, in the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes.
Ooh.
I don't believe so. And I've talked with Breonna's mother, Tamika Palmer, and her family. And her family deserves justice. She was a beautiful young woman. She had as her life goal to become a nurse, and she wanted to become an EMT to first learn what's going on out on the street so she could then become a nurse and save lives. And her life was taken unjustifiably and tragically and violently. And it brings me to, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that America witnessed, during which an American man was tortured and killed under the knee of an armed, uniformed police officer. And people around our country of every race, of every age, of every gender, perfect strangers to each other, marched shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, fighting for us to finally achieve that ideal of equal justice under law. And I was a part of those peaceful protests. And I believe strongly that, first of all, we are never going to condone violence, but we always must fight for the values that we hold dear, including the fight to achieve our ideals. And that's why Joe Biden and I have said on this subject, look, and I'm a former career prosecutor. I know what I'm talking about. Bad cops are bad for good cops. We need reform of our policing in America and our criminal justice system, which is why Joe and I will immediately ban chokeholds and carotid holds.
And we will launch Police 2.
We will require a national registry for police officers who break the law. We will, on the issue of criminal justice reform, get rid of private prisons and cash bail, and we will decriminalize marijuana, and we will expunge the records of those who have been convicted of marijuana. This is a time for leadership on a tragic, tragic issue of unarmed Black people in America who have been killed.
Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me pose the same question to you. In the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Well, our heart breaks for the loss of any innocent American life. And the family of Breonna Taylor has our sympathies. But I trust our justice system, a grand jury that refused the evidence. And it really is remarkable that as a former prosecutor, you would assume that
the grand jury
looking at all the evidence
released a statement saying that the prosecutor in that case did not present them with all the evidence.
And with regard to George Floyd, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. And justice will be served. But there's also no excuse for the rioting and looting that followed. I mean, it really is astonishing. Flora Westbrook is with us here tonight in Salt Lake City. Just a few weeks ago, I stood at what used to be her salon. It was burned to the ground by rioters and looters. And Flora is still trying to put her life back together. And I must tell you, this presumption that you hear consistently from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that
property is not more
America
important than people's lives, okay?
And that, as Joe Biden said, that he believes that law enforcement has an implicit bias against minorities is a great insult to the men and women who serve in law enforcement.
He has a fly on his head.
To know, who puts on the uniform of law enforcement every day. And President Trump and I stand with you. And it is remarkable.
She just saw it, too.
That when Senator Tim Scott tried to pass a police reform bill, brought together a group of Republicans and Democrats, Senator Harris, you got up and walked out of the room. And then you filibustered Senator Tim Scott's bill on the Senate floor that would have provided new accountability, new resources. But we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement, improving public safety, and supporting our African American neighbors and all of our minorities. Under President Trump's
leadership, is the moderator going to say anything?
We stand with law enforcement, and we'll do what we've done from day one. And
thank you.
Also, here, just in short,
record unemployment,
police disproportionately police the poor,
for school choice,
and
for all of
poor people are disproportionately Black and brown.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President.
Which means that police develop biases against Black and brown people.
Was personally prosecuted. Everything from child sexual assault to homicide. I'm the only one on this stage who has prosecuted the big banks for taking advantage of America's
still
homeowners.
there.
I'm the only one on this stage who prosecuted for-profit colleges for taking advantage of our veterans. And the reality of this is that
Every second
we
it's
are
up there makes
talking
him look
about
worse.
an election in 27 days, where last week the President of the United States took a debate stage in front of 70 million Americans
Is
and
it
refused to
dead, or
condemn
is it just
white supremacists.
sitting there?
Not true.
And
Not true.
it wasn't like he didn't have a chance. He didn't do it, and then he doubled down. And then he said, when pressed, stand back, stand by. And this is a part of a pattern of Donald Trump's. He
There it
called
goes.
Mexicans rapists and criminals.
True.
He instituted as his first act a Muslim ban. He, on the issue of
True.
Charlottesville, where people were peacefully protesting the need for racial justice, where a young woman was killed. And on the other side, there were neo-Nazis carrying tiki torches, shouting racial epithets, anti-Semitic slurs. And Donald Trump, when asked about it, said, there were fine people on both sides. This is who we have as the President of the United States. And America, you deserve better. Joe Biden will be a president who brings our country together
Senator Harris,
and recognizes the beauty in our diversity and the fact that we
Senator
all
Harris,
have
thank
so
you.
much more in common than what separates us.
Vice President Pence, let me give you a minute to respond.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that very much. You know, I think this is one of the things that makes people dislike the media so much in this country, Susan, is that you selectively edit, just like Senator Harris did, comments that President Trump and I and others on our side of the aisle make. I mean, Senator Harris conveniently omitted, after the president made comments about people on either side of the debate over monuments, he condemned
It's not a debate over
the KKK,
monuments.
neo-Nazis and white supremacists, and has done so.
It was literally a
repeatedly.
giant rally organized by
Concerned
the
that he doesn't
alt-right
condemn neo-Nazis.
to show that
President
like
Trump has
Nazis
Jewish
and white
grandchildren.
supremacists are
His daughter and
respectable
son-in-law are Jewish. This is a president who
and a force to be reckoned with.
respects and cherishes
That's what that
all
was.
of the American people. But you talk about having personally prosecuted. I'm glad you brought up your record, Senator.
Thank you.
But I really need to make this point. When you were DA in San Francisco, when you left office,
Yeah, this blow is going to land.
African Americans were 19 times more likely to be prosecuted for minor drug offenses than whites and Hispanics. When you were Attorney General of California,
Thank you,
you
Vice President.
increased the disproportionate incarceration of
Thank
blacks
you.
in California. You did nothing on criminal justice reform in California. You didn't lift a finger to pass the
Yeah,
first step back on Capitol Hill.
this will hurt.
I mean, the reality is your record
Thank
speaks
you,
for
Vice
itself.
President
President
Pence.
Trump and I have fought for criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Vice President
We've fought for
Pence.
educational choice and opportunities for African Americans, all of our
Thank you,
minorities.
sir.
And we'll do it for 4 more
Thank
years.
you. You know, there is no more important issue than the final issue that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is the issue of the election
But
itself.
Susan, he attacked my record. I would like an opportunity to respond.
Let me give you 30 seconds because we're running out of
I
time.
appreciate that. First of all, having served as the Attorney General of the state of California, the work that I did is a model of what our nation needs to do, and we will be able to do under a Joe Biden presidency. Our agenda includes what this administration has failed to do. It will be about not only instituting a ban on chokeholds and carotid holes.
Thank you.
Not only,
Thank you, Senator
I
Harris.
would like to go through.
These are points that you made earlier in the hour, and I want to talk about the election itself before we have to.
But I
conclude our
want to talk
debate.
about the connection between what Joe and I will do and my record, which includes, I was the first statewide officer to institute a requirement that my agents would wear body cameras and keep them on full time. We were the first to initiate a requirement that there would be a training for law enforcement on implicit bias, because yes, Joe Biden and I recognize that implicit bias does exist, Mr. Vice President, contrary to what you may believe. We did the work of instituting reforms that were about investing in reentry. This is the work that we have done and the work we will do going forward. And again, I will not be lectured by the Vice President on our record of what we have done in terms of law enforcement and keeping our communities safe, and a commitment to reforming the criminal justice system of America.
Let's
Thank
also
you,
talk
Senator
about Mike
Harris. And I'd like
Pence's
to
record in
pose the
Indiana, where he's like
first-
one of the most
I'd like you to
hated
respond
governors
first
they've
to
ever
the
had.
question on our final topic, the election itself. President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If your ticket wins and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what steps would you and Vice President Biden then take? What would happen next? You have 2 minutes.
So I'll tell you, Joe and I are, I think, particularly proud of the coalition that we've built around our campaign. We probably have one of the broadest coalitions of folks that you've ever seen in a presidential race. Of course, we have the support of Democrats, but also independents and Republicans. In fact, 7 members of President George W. Bush's cabinet are supporting our ticket. We have the support of Colin Powell, Cindy McCain, John Kasich, over 500.
I know that this is a talking
generals,
point
retired generals,
with how they
and
can build
former national
coalitions,
security experts
but this
and
is
advisors are supporting our campaign.
just such
And I
a
believe
pile
they are
of
doing
bullshit
that
and a
because they
bad
know
misstep.
that Joe Biden
Why are you
has
bragging
a
about the
deep,
people who dragged
deep
us into an
seated
unnecessary war
to
that
fight for
that
our
lasted like
and to fight
2
for
decades.
the integrity of our democracy and to bring integrity back to the White House. And so
Almost
we
2
believe in the
decades.
American people. We believe in our democracy. And here's what I'd like to say to everybody. Vote. Please vote. Vote early. Come up with a plan to vote. Go to iwillvote.com. You can also go to joebiden.com. We have it within our power in these next 27 days to make the decision about what will be the course of our country for the next 4 years. And it is within our power, and if we use our vote and we use our voice, we will win. And we will not let anyone subvert our democracy with what Donald Trump has been doing, as he did on the debate stage last week, when again in front of 70 million people, he openly attempted to suppress the vote. Joe Biden, on the other hand, on that same debate stage, because clearly Donald Trump doesn't think he can run on a record because it's a failed record, Joe Biden on that stage said, hey, just please vote. So I'll repeat what Joe said. Please vote.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Pence, President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If Vice President Biden is declared the winner and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what would be your role and responsibility as Vice President? What would you personally do? You have 2 minutes.
Well, Susan, first and foremost, I think we're going to win this election. Because while Joe Biden and Kamala Harris rattle off a long litany of the establishment in Washington, D.C., an establishment that Joe Biden's been a part of for 47 years, President Donald Trump has launched a movement of everyday Americans from every walk of life. And I have every confidence that those same Americans that delivered that historic victory in 2016, they see this president's record where we rebuild our military, we revived our economy through tax cuts and rolling back regulation, fighting for fair trade, unleashing American energy. We appointed
regulations are
federal
like to
courts at every
protect
level.
average people,
and we
right?
stood with the men and women of law enforcement every single day. And I think
That's what regulations are
that
for.
movement of Americans has only grown stronger in the last 4 years. But when you talk about accepting the outcome of the election, I must tell you, Senator, your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election. It's amazing.
So is
When
this
Joe
him
Biden was
saying
president of
no?
the United States,
He wouldn't
the
accept it?
FBI actually spied on President Trump and my campaign.
He hasn't answered the question
I mean,
yet.
there were documents released this week that the CIA actually made a referral to the FBI documenting that those allegations were coming from the Hillary Clinton campaign. And of course, we've all seen the avalanche, what you put the country through for the better part of 3 years until it was found that there was no obstruction, no collusion, case closed. And then
This
Senator
is
Harris,
incredible.
you and your
He hasn't
colleagues
answered it yet.
in the
He hasn't
Congress
said
tried to
that he will
impeach the
commit to a
President of the
peaceful
United States
transfer of power.
over a phone call. And now Hillary Clinton has actually said to Joe Biden that in her words, under no circumstances should he concede the election. So let me just say, I think we're going to win this election. President Trump and I are fighting every day in courthouses to prevent Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from changing the rules and creating this universal mail-in voting that'll create a massive opportunity for voter fraud. And we have a free and fair
There's
election.
no evidence
We
that
know we're gonna have
mail-in
confidence
voting,
in it. And I believe in
universal
all my
or
heart that
otherwise,
President Donald Trump's gonna be
engenders more
reelected for
fraud.
4 more years.
You know, I've written
So
all the
he didn't
questions
answer the
I've asked
question.
tonight, but for the final question of the debate, I'd like to read a question that someone else wrote. The Utah Debate Commission asked students in the state to write essays about what they would like to ask you. And I want to close tonight's debate with the question posed by Brecklin Brown. She's an 8th grader at Springville Junior High in Springville, Utah. And here's what she wrote, quote, "When I watch the news, all I see is arguing between Democrats and Republicans. When I watch the news, all I see is citizen fighting against citizen. When I watch the news, all I see are 2 candidates from opposing parties trying to tear each other down. If our leaders can't get along, how are the citizens supposed to get along?" And then she added, "Your examples could make all the difference to bring us together."
You can't get along with people who
So to
don't
each
want you
of
to
in turn,
exist.
I'd like you to take 1 minute and respond to Brecklin.
You
Vice
can't
President Pence, you
coexist
have 1 minute.
alongside people who don't
Brecklin,
want you
it's a
to
wonderful
exist.
question. And let me just commend you for taking an interest in public life. I started following the news when I was very young. And in America, we believe in a free and open exchange of debate. And we celebrate that.
Interesting,
It's how
because you
we've
haven't
created
answered
literally the
many of the
freest and most
questions in this
prosperous
debate,
nation
Mike Pence.
in the history of the world. But I would tell you that don't assume that what you're seeing on your local news networks is synonymous with the American people. You know, I look at the relationship between Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late justice who we just lost from the Supreme Court, and the late Justice Antonin Scalia.
This makes
They
me
were
want to
on
rip my
polar
eyes out.
opposites on the Supreme Court of the United States. One very liberal, one very conservative. But what's been learned since her passing was the 2 of them and their families were the very closest of friends. I mean, here in America, we can disagree. We can debate vigorously, as Senator Harris and I
We can
have
disagree
on this
about
stage
some
tonight.
things, not
When the debate is over,
all
we
things,
come
okay?
together as Americans. And that's what people do in big cities and small towns all across this country. So I just want to encourage you, Brecklin. I want to tell you that we're going to work every day to have government as good as our people. And the American people each and every day love a good debate. We love a good argument. But we always come together and are always there for one another
Thank you,
in
Vice
times of
President.
need. And we've especially learned that
Thank you,
through
Mr.
the
Vice President.
difficulties of this year.
Senator Harris, what would you say to Brecklin?
First of all, I love hearing from our young leaders. And when I hear her words, when I hear your words, Brecklin, I know our future is bright because it is that perspective on who we are and who we should be that is a sign of leadership and is something we should all aspire to be. And that, that brings me to Joe. Joe Biden, one of the reasons that Joe decided to run for president is after Charlottesville, which we talked about earlier. It so troubled him and upset him like it did all of us, that there was that kind of hate and division. What propelled Joe to run for president was to see that over the course of the last 4 years, what Brecklin described has been happening. Joe has a long-standing reputation of working across the aisle and working in a bipartisan way. And that's what he's going to do as president. Joe Biden has a history of lifting people up and fighting for their dignity. You have to know Joe's story to know that Joe has known pain, he has known suffering, and he has known love. And so, Brecklin, when you think about the future, I do believe the future is bright. And it will be because of your leadership, and it will be because we fight for each person's voice through their vote, and we get engaged in this election because you have the ability through your work and through eventually your vote
Thank you,
to
Senator
determine
Harris.
the future of our country and what its leadership looks like.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you so much for being with
Yeah.
us tonight. We want to thank also the University of Utah for its hospitality, and most of all, our thanks to all the Americans who watched this debate tonight. Again, our best wishes for a quick recovery to President Trump, the First Lady, and everyone who is battling COVID-19. The second presidential debate is next week on October 15th, a town